Hey, and welcome to Evolve with Grace and the next Astrology Friday. It's me, Stella Grace. Thank you for joining me. I'm actually coming to you from the evening today. Normally I do these on a Friday daytime, but I'm very organised this evening. Well, it's half term, so I'm getting in there when I can. I'm bringing this transmission to you on Thursday the 30th, but we're looking at the week ahead from Friday the 31st of May to Friday up until Friday the 6th of June. And it's a big week in astrology. I say this most weeks, but it's true, and this week no less. We have so much to cover. I'm really excited to get into it with you, and we're going to have an oracle deck at the end, an oracle card, sorry, from a deck at the end for a little bit of inspiration for the week ahead. I've got my chart here as per, and I'm looking at a couple of charts for the beginning of the week and towards the end because we've got so much to cover. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. We're going to start with a topic though. We're going to start with the sun, moon and rising sign and why each of those things are significant in our birth charts and why they're a really great place to start upon and also to expand upon and revisit when we're already into our astrology journey. So wherever you're at on your astrology journey, I'd like to think there's something to take from these videos that I do. Because I try and explain it in a way that is easy to understand and digest for those of us who don't want to get too bogged down with the jargon. There's a lot of jargon with astrology, isn't there? And I'm really passionate about making it accessible for all. So I will explain through some of the aspects of astrology and some of the planetary influences and their energies in what I think is a really simple way, but also there's some knowledge and some wisdom for wherever you're at, hopefully in your astrology journey, because we'll be looking at a topic and we'll also be looking at the astrological weather for the week ahead. And there is some interesting weather for the week ahead in astrology. We've got the new moon on the 6th in Gemini. That's a packed powerhouse of planets in Gemini. There's a whole stellium of 6 planets around the new moon. So we're going to come on to that in a little bit. And I have to mention at this early stage, we've got a little bit of a theme going on with love is in the air. Those are the words that were kind of dropping in and rotating in my head, the love is in the air lyrics, but with a twist. So I'm going to come on to a little bit more of that as well in a minute. But let's get into our topic. So the sun, moon and rising sign. So if you don't know your sun, moon and rising sign, you probably know your sun sign. Most of us know our main star sign, the month we were born. Most people know that. If you don't and you want some help with looking up your birth chart, please reach out and I will direct you or go through a reading with you. Either way, that whatever you're looking for, I can support you with whatever level it is you want to kind of get into and get to understand your chart. So do reach out if you need to. But I'm going to explain a bit of an overview about our sun, moon and rising signs because they are really the kind of main 3 influences in our birth chart. And so we're going to think a little bit about those initially. So let's start with the sun. So as I mentioned, most people know their star sign, and the sun is really the one to start with. It's the one we know most about because it's our birth month, but also it's our vitality, it's our life force energy. And there's a premise in astrology that it's the sign we've come here to be. It's, you know, this all the old adages of go to the light, be the light. You know, we can take some reference from that really from the sun. It's our life force, it's our driving force, it's our conscious awareness, it can be our conscious ego. So the things that we see in ourselves and the things that we want to be and we want to move towards and we want to develop in life. Those can be all aspects that are really relevant to us in our sun sign. If we know the sun sign, we can look up, you know, the traits of it. So I'll share with you, for me personally, I'm a Cancerian. So I am, you know, passionate about my family, of course. I deeply love my children. I mean, we all love our kids, don't we? But to me, you know, my children are my world, and there's lots of really family and home traits I have. Now I do have, I'll just jump into the moon sign for a minute. because this is give you some personal context, and then you can think about your own, or think about the sun, moon and rising as an overview. My moon sign being in Sagittarius is very different to Cancerian, so I've got another real different flavour to my personality. And this is, I think, is an interesting point that we can think about for all of us. Our birth chart often throws up, or often is a real tapestry, if you like. It's a rich tapestry, sometimes of contradictions. And if you think about it, us humans are complex beings. And so we're certainly not all like, like our sun sign individually. We're certainly not all 1/12 of the whole population being like Cancerians, being only like Cancerians, or whatever your sun sign is. We're not just that, we're also so much more than the sun. So it is a great place to start, because it is our vitality, it is our leading dominant force. It's also, the kind of development of our lifetime, so to speak. But there is so much more in a chart as well, and that's why I'm covering sun, moon and rising tonight all together. So the sun also, because the interesting thing about the planets is they all have an essence and an energy that represents and reflects in us people as well. So there's a really beautiful common saying in astrology, as above, so below. And this is really apt for the reminder that we all have all the essences of the planets and the signs within us in different parts of our life. So our sun sign, going back to that for a moment, for example, that's the light we've come here to be. That's our leading personality. That's our conscious ego, our conscious expression, who we've come here to be. So we really take on those kind of traits of a sun sign quite dominantly. The sun is also a masculine aspect in the sky. Now, we all have masculine and feminine aspects within all of us, whether we're men or women. And the sun is a more masculine energy, as opposed to the moon, or not opposed, but in contrast to the moon, which is a feminine energy. And of course, we all have all the planets somewhere in our chart. At the moment we were born, the planets were all a feature in our chart somewhere. And that's how we have a look at our chart, is through the time. If we know our time, our birth time, or if we know as close to as possible, we can get the sun, moon and rising and the other planets where they all were as a snapshot, the moment you were born, or as close to the moment you were born as possible, that make up this picture of where the planets sit in our birth chart. And that gives us an indication of where they sit in terms of the influences they have in our lives. So they can sit in different places that touch different parts of our life. So the sun, a more masculine energy, because it's our creativity and it's more of a doing energy. It's more of a masculine doing action energy. Whereas the moon, being feminine, is our intuition, our subconscious. It's sometimes the underworkings. It's our emotional nature. It's the cyclical nature. You think of the moon in terms of, she's very clear, very highlighting, very illuminating at showing her changes in the cycle. It's a very feminine energy to be showing that cyclical nature in a very changeable way. Each month we have in the new moon phase, and in 2 weeks later the full moon phase. So we've got that real evidence, that real clarity on the changing of the cycles with the moon, and that's very in keeping with feminine essence. So the moon is, we will know it if we've ever seen our birth chart. And again, as I said, it's quite easy to find out. So do get in touch if you want to find out more about your own chart. You can drop me a message at stellagrace.me and have a look at my astrology readings there. Or drop me a question or comment. I'm more than happy to answer questions under these videos as well. So if you don't know your moon sign, do get in touch. Or if you do know your moon sign and want to share some of your favourite aspects and traits about your moon sign, do let me know. So as a Sag moon, I've got quite a contrast to my Cancerian sun, and my Sag moon is very adventurous. It can be wanting to be quite flighty and quite active and keep things interesting and spontaneous and freedom and fun. So it's got quite a different flavour to it than my sun sign. And we all have, you know, many different aspects, some more contrasting than others, but all of them different flavours that make up our whole personality. So the moon also is sometimes our subconscious, as I mentioned. So the moon we want to think about really, because the moon is where things can sometimes percolate under the surface, and where things can come out when we're either triggered or when we're perhaps in a more unconscious or default mode. So the sun is quite out there. That's really highlighted, isn't it? It's really kind of obvious, our sun sign, but the moon can work a little bit more subtly, and sometimes it can come up in an unconscious way if we're kind of triggered, or if things haven't gone the way we'd hoped, or if we're, you know, maybe a bit under the weather. But again, it's also our intuitive nature, because again, if we're thinking about those feminine essences, it's more of a being and receptive energy rather than the doing of the masculine side of the sun. We've got the being element of the feminine intuitive side and emotional side with our moon sign. And these are really strong influences. So the sun and the moon being probably the two most significant influences in our chart, our being, our vitality, and our emotional sides, and our conscious and subconscious. You can see them kind of in flavors, in themes that work together. You know, we've got the day and the night with the moon and the sun, and that's a real interesting cycle as well. You know, when we're shining, when we're in our essence, when we're in our daytime mode, it's kind of we're showing our kind of full personality. But the moon is more subtle, more subconscious, more sometimes more hidden actually as well. But it's also, it can be our reflective side, things we're kind of, you know, working through under the surface, or things that we want to reflect and grow from behind the scenes perhaps. That can be another really good use of our moon sign energy. And then coming on to the rising sign, the rising sign's a little bit different, but again, very significant. So the rising sign isn't actually a planet in our birth chart. It's actually the sign that was in the ascendant. So that's the right hand side. Or think of rather than getting into again the jargon of the chart, think about the sign that the sun was in at dawn that day that you were born. So at that dawn, the break of the new day that you were born, normally something around there is indicative of our rising sign. It's representative as well. That gives us an idea of the essence of the nature of the rising sign in our chart, because it's about the cloak we wear to the world, or the mask we put on, or how we step out to the world when we show up. You know, we step out each morning. It's kind of the essence of our social personality, more so than our sun sign, more so than our vibrant personality. We've got the our social personality with the rising sign. It's who someone would remember you foremost at a party, usually, as you first step into a room, or you first introduce yourself to someone, or first impressions, things like that. And it's about our physical appearance as well. The rising sign is often about our physical appearance and our social personality, that first impression energy. That is our rising sign, and that's why it's really significant as well, because although it hasn't got an actual planet representative anywhere, it's got a line in the birth chart, and that's called the ascendant. That's the rising. And again, thinking about where the sun was at dawn, the day of your birthday, or around thinking about that dawn energy, that fresh new day, how we're appearing to the world that day. That's the essence of the rising sign energy, and it's really quite significant for another flavour of our personalities, as I was mentioning. So that's a kind of real overview of the sun, moon and rising. Please do ask any questions in the comments if you'd like to know a bit more. I'm happy to answer any questions in the comments if you've got more. But otherwise, I'm going to come to our astrology update for this week. Now, we've got lots going on as per. And I'm also going to mention that if you've not heard one of my Astro chats before, or even if you have, I might not have mentioned it, I'm coming from a perspective really more of evolutionary astrology, if that, I had to define it, if that is, there is different types of astrology, and evolutionary astrology is the type of astrology that I resonate with the most. And what that means is it's giving us the opportunity to think about the planets and the signs as their energy and essence, and to utilize them to make them work for us, not in a selfish way, not in a way that we want to be, you know, manipulative or anything like that, but in a way we get to use the opportunities for our growth, for, you know, the next highest choice, for feeling the most well, for supporting others, for you know, supporting our businesses, our families, for shining, for thriving. It's utilizing the energies and their the planets and all their energies and essences for our highest good, really, and for our growth and for our evolution. And it's also really a fun energy to work with astrology, because we get to be really curious about what's going on in the sky. I'm always blown away by how uncanny it is in reflection to what's going on in the world. You know, I mean, I would say that I'm an astrologer, it resonates with me, but when you start to look at astrology and what's happening in the sky, you can see the reflection, and it's really interesting. So we get to be really curious about that. You know, we get to look into these things and see how much impact they are having on a day-to-day basis in our personal lives and on the world stage. I mean, we've got some really big astrology happening behind the scenes that's kind of running along. And I speak about this quite a bit, but we've got the big heavyweight of Pluto in Aquarius, just kind of retrograded, gone back into Aquarius. Going back forward into Aquarius after a long time in Capricorn. So we've got big changes to our system and structures. And there's a previous video on that in my YouTube channel collection called New Systems Are Go, because we've got this really interesting long-term, well, 20-year term that Pluto is moving, which is shaking up our systems and moving them from the more Capricorn authoritarianism to the more freedom-seeking, positively rebellious aspects of Aquarius, where it's more power to the people, because people are really thinking more about how we are governed and how we want to, you know, put our faith and our belief systems into practice. So that's just one example of how astrology is ticking along, and we're also seeing changes happening on the world stage. This of course happens in our personal lives as well. You know, those are the differences between some of the long-term planets like Pluto. It takes 20 odd years to change into a new sign. And we've got things like the moon, or we can talk about, which takes 2.5 days to change a sign, very quick moving. Again, we think about that cyclical nature of the moon, very feminine, very changeable, very, you know, we think about that in almost like an emotional sense, in a cyclical sense. So these are some of the interesting facets of astrology and how they can reflect for our personal lives and for our kind of overall evolution as a collective, as a global network of people. So some interesting stuff. So back to this week. So we've got, at the beginning of this week, Friday the 31st of May, we've got a little bit of a theme brewing, as I mentioned, about love is in the air, but there's a few twists to that. So why I had the words and the lyrics "love is in the air" going around in my mind, I believe, is we've got the Sun and Venus making a conjunction. That means a close relationship in the sign of Gemini. Now, there's other planets in Gemini as well that are gearing up around the new moon, and some others in Gemini at the moment. But with the Sun and Venus in Gemini together conjunct, we've got this synergy between them of heightening our romantic connections and energy around us. Now, I love Gemini season, just as an aside. You know, if we're not thinking about love specifically for a minute, if we're not thinking about necessarily relationships with others, this can mean all relationships. Venus touches on all our relationships. I'm just laughing at the noise. So I'm looking after bunnies this week for half term, and they're just going to be really noisy now. And also thinking about Venus, you know what else rabbits like to do. Anyway, so back to Venus in other news. She's a feminine energy, and she really concentrates on relationships of all kinds. So first and foremost, the one with ourselves is key, is the most prioritizing relationship we can have. And with the Sun and Venus together in that conjunction and the synergy between them that's heightened when they come together, we've got a real opportunity over this week from the 31st right up until the 6th. They're kind of in close conjunction, particularly on the new moon on the 6th, which is significant, and I'll come on to in a minute as to why. We've got this heightened Venus energy. So this real lovely touch of harmony, of femininity, of beauty, aesthetics, our values, our how we show up in relationships with ourselves and with others. And we've got all of that heightened with the Sun and Venus coming together, because the Sun, as I mentioned, being our life force energy, being touched and being synergized by the harmonious attributes of Venus. So it's a bit like love is in the air. And the other reason why it's love is in the air is because Gemini is an air sign. So we've got this lightness. That's what I was going to say. It's like I do love Gemini season for this lighter energy. We've come into summer, and really it feels like a time where we're gearing up now for the midsummer solstice, which is on the cusp of Gemini season going into Cancer season. And I think there's a real lightness in the air. I touched on this in last week's episode. Actually, this was the topic of last week's episode, was the wit and wisdom of Gemini season. It's a lighter energy. We're still in the throes of Gemini season for a while yet, until around the midsummer solstice, around the 21st. And it's a lighter energy. It's a communicative energy. And so where we've got Venus and the Sun and a whole stellium of other planets in Gemini, we've got this communicative air lightness. It's not the most amazingly aligned time for depth, but Jupiter is helping with that. Jupiter is expansion and depth of knowledge and wisdom. So with that in Gemini, and this is what we talked about last week, is the opportunity to deepen our curiousness, our lightness, our conversations, our knowledge, our learning. We can deepen all that with Jupiter there in Gemini. But for the rest of the planets in Gemini, the Sun, Moon, Venus, the midheaven, which is our career line, and Mercury, all in Gemini. Those 6 are in Gemini by the new moon on the 6th. 6 planets together in Gemini on the 6th of the 6th month. Let's just note that as well. I love a bit of numerology, and I love triple numbers. To me, that means, you know, abundance and good luck and harmony. That's all of those lovely things with numbers, especially in 3s. So that's another interesting little link. So we've got all that lightness, all that air element. Gemini is an air element. And this is a really interesting thing to consider if you're somebody who likes to set new moon intentions or to be working on manifesting. Now, if you've heard me talk about manifesting before, you'll know that I'm not somebody who's completely fluffy and airy-fairy and thinks just make a wish and upon the stars and, you know, it will land in our laps. That's not what evolutionary astrology is about, and that's not where my belief lies either. We get to look at these alignments and these energies and then see how we can bring them in, who can make them work with action steps. We've got opportunities happening in the cosmos to align with and align to, and to set our actions up so that we can bring them into a tangible reality. And so with this lovely lightness of Gemini season, it's a great time for bringing in matters of improving communications, areas of love, if you do want to strengthen connections, relationships with yourself and with others, this is an amazing time to do that with Venus in Gemini, and with the Sun and Moon in Gemini as well. All together, they are providing a harmonious touch to our connections, to our vitality, to our emotions, to our relationships, to our values. So we've got this real sociable aspect happening as well. As I mentioned last week, so Gemini is the social butterfly, and with Venus there as well, we've got this lightness and this frivolity and this connecting. It's a real flirty time potentially. You know, it's got that light energy to it. Again, it is more on a superficial or surface level. But again, that's with choice and awareness. You know, if you want to take things deeper within yourselves and with others, that is a choice. I don't ever advocate for not taking action because it's not necessarily aligned in astrology. It's about really taking and running with what resonates with you and disregarding what doesn't. That's the beauty of awareness. That I find the beauty of astrology as well. We get to see these things with awareness, have these amazing conversations, which in itself is quite wild, given, you know, that we get to speak so freely now, and in years gone by we didn't have that right, certainly as women. So it's quite an amazing time, and what a thing to actually think about with all the Venus and Gemini energy, having conversations, women's empowerment, not just women, but you know, it's an interesting one to think about with Venus in Gemini, particularly women's rights to be able to talk and speak. That's also feminine essence within all of us though as well. You know, for the men out there that are watching, it's about also empowering our own feminine side, but not to the point that it has to override our masculine side. You know, so this is the real beauty of looking at things in a balance and allowing all parts of ourselves. It's an interesting journey. So Friday the 31st, we have the Sun and Venus conjunct. So that's when the Sun and Venus are conjunct, gearing up to be exactly conjunct by midweek. So they're only 1 degree apart on the 31st, and then that gears up to being exact the middle of next week. So we're going to have that energy really heightened that I was talking about the harmony, about a great time for communications. It's a really great time for strengthening relationships, strengthening sibling relationships, strengthening connections with neighbours. These are all Gemini themes as well. And where Venus touches, she brings that touch of softness, of femininity, of ease, flow, grace. It's a really nice time to be able to kind of access self-care, but not beating ourselves with a stick because we're supposed to be doing it, or stick something else on the to-do list. It's about nurturing ourselves and others, nurturing our relationships, nurturing our conversations. These are all really great aspects to utilize in this energy. We've also got around this weekend Uranus conjunct Mercury. So as we've just mentioned, we've got a softness and a harmony that we can access for our connections and our communications. We've also got the potential for some plot twists there, because Uranus conjunct Mercury, so those two planets' energies combining, making a synergy of keeping things quite interesting, which Uranus likes to do. So Uranus is the planet of revolution, it's a planet of change, it's bringing things up out of the blue. So we can expect, amongst a generally harmonious week, we can also expect occasionally a U-turn, maybe something crop up we hadn't considered, maybe something out of the blue, something new, something revolutionary. Sometimes can feel inconvenient, but what I always like to remember with Uranus is it shakes things up where change was needed in the long run. It might feel inconvenient or abrupt or a bit chaotic in the short term, but actually down the line it's always going to have been for a higher good. You know, we're meant to stay, we're not meant to stay the same. Things aren't meant to stay stagnant. So Uranus is amazing at bringing change, bringing some fresh energy, bringing something new to light, bringing something spontaneous often. So look out for some spontaneity in your communications around midweek, this weekend, brewing over up until next week. We've also got still the healing opportunities of Chiron and Mars. So I've been talking about this, has been rumbling on in the background as well for some time, some weeks now. Chiron and Mars together is bringing a healing opportunity. So Mars, our planet of direction and will and drive and energy, dynamic energy, is being touched by Chiron, the wounded healer. So we've got some dynamic energy coming to serve our deepest wounds for the result of us growing, moving forward, alchemizing, finding the gold in our grit. That's a really great use of that energy, and that is currently this weekend, and that's fading off into next week. So we've got another kind of healing opportunity. Anytime our wounds are triggered, anytime things are coming up that are poking at that old thing, old wound, you know, it's not for the purpose of tormenting us. I don't believe. The universe doesn't work like that. It's about, what do I need next to grow? What am I needing to bring to this situation, this time? What new wisdom can I access? What new healing modality can I soothe myself with this time to bring, you know, a deeper layer of healing this time? So those are some interesting things to think about. Then by the 4th of June, we've got Pluto trining Mercury. So some really interesting kind of opportunities for our communication this week. Lots of different areas of communication are being activated. So we've had, you know, Venus and the harmonious kind of grouping of the new moon energy that's really all together in Gemini and bringing that lightness and that communication. We've also got Uranus keeping things interesting with Mercury. And then we've got a trine. So the Pluto in Aquarius is then trining, which means it's making a positive, easeful, flowing aspect to Mercury. That's about big changes. That's about changes in dynamics of power, of control, of death and rebirth, all those areas being positively influenced with our communication. So it'd be a really amazing time for looking at power dynamics in our communications, in our relationships, in our own thinking as well, because Mercury is our own thinking, it's our own thought patterns, it's our own limiting beliefs. Sometimes maybe they're up for renewal, maybe they're up for change, for death and rebirth. What old stuff can go, because Pluto energy loves to do that, clear out the old, the death of the old so that the new can be reborn. That's great Pluto energy. And with that trining, with Pluto making that favourable aspect to our Mercury, to our communication, to our ideas, to our travel plans, to our projects, to our communication, we've got that real opportunity there to shake things up, clear out the old, bring in the new, which I love. And then by the 7th of June, the whole stellium of the planets in Gemini that I mentioned, well, certainly Venus, the moon and the sun are all then squaring Saturn. So the new moon, the sun, they're together in a new moon. Always the sun and the moon are in a conjunction. So that synergy of them, those planets, those energies combining, that's always in a new moon energy, the sun and the moon combining, because that's why we can't see the moon, that aspect. And that's also all together with Venus, and that's making a square to Saturn. So whilst we've got that favourable harmonious touch of Venus on the new moon energy, which gives us real impetus for what we want to bring in, what we want to manifest, again with our intention setting for the new lunar month ahead, which is what the new moon always brings, opportunity to bring in the new lunar month. We can think about areas of how we want to improve our relationships and our communication and our nurturing, but we've got a consideration, and that is the square to Saturn. Now the square aspect is always challenge requiring some action. So that doesn't always mean it's going to feel easy, but it does mean it's going to bring about some growth, some learning, usually, again, for the longer term good. So it might be that there is some challenge to those things we want to bring in, and there is some challenge as well as the areas of harmony. And this is, like I was saying before, there is these contradictions, because that is the complex nature of life and of us as people, isn't it? We've got these things to consider. Life throws curveballs, but it's always for an opportunity to grow from. You know, if things aren't in the harmonious energy that you'd like them to be, one, you can adopt it within yourself first, being the energy of that which you wish to see more of in your life. I'm really a passionate advocate for that. We don't always, you know, naturally feel amazing or naturally have things coming into our life that's really good and easy and flowing. We sometimes have to adopt that to bring it in, or to be that and bring it in, or to, you know, decide to influence a situation in our life in that way rather than in a negative way. This is, again, is the beauty of awareness. But where we get a challenging aspect like the square, it might throw up some challenge to give us something to learn, give us something to grow from, give us a challenge that requires us to act in some way to, you know, consider something different, or to learn something or grow. So wherever you are invited with some challenge requiring action, think about how it can serve you something to grow and serve the situation. How can it be perhaps serving your relationships when a challenge comes in? What is this trying to teach you? What is this trying to deepen in you? What can this offer you for a fresher perspective or some more wisdom next time? So I invite you to think about some of those questions. I'm going to pull a quick oracle card because we have covered quite a bit. We're on 36 minutes already. I told you it was a big week in astrology. So I am currently writing my own book and oracle deck, which I'm really going to be excited to share with you, hopefully the end of this year or beginning of next year, depending on how long publishing takes. But in the meantime, I'm using the beautiful Rebecca Campbell's The Rose Oracle. I thought I'd use the Rose Oracle this evening. You see my roses there next to me. And because we've got Venus activated in the sky. So roses are a very Venus theme and a Venus representation. So let's get a card for this weekend and the week ahead, for the highest good of all. See what message wants to be shared. I always set that intention that we're given guidance that's for the highest good of all only. Let's have a little look. Not going to come out easily. What do we want? Okay. Whispers of the Mother Earth. So this is nice for thinking about that feminine energy again, connecting with your own inner mother. Connecting with how you parent yourself is a really beautiful energy of this card and of Venus. And we've also got creativity, ideas, inspiration, artist, writer and channel. And that couldn't be any more fitting for Gemini energy. Because one thing I didn't mention actually, which this card has just reminded me, thank you very much, is that a really beautiful way of expressing all of the Sun, Moon and Venus energies in Gemini would be writing, would be, we've talked about talking, you know, with passion, with harmony, but journaling, channeling, those would all be great tools to really access a deeper relationship with yourself and with others at this time. Because when we're doing any kind of self-inquiry, any kind of self-reflection, any kind of personal growth through something like journaling or writing or art or creativity, or whichever way speaks to you, we also, any work we do on ourselves really kind of spills into our relationships with others. It's that ripple effect. So this is a really beautiful energy to utilize this week and this weekend, of how we're serving ourselves, how we're serving others, getting creative with all of that Venus and Gemini energy. So enjoy that, and I'll look forward to seeing you next Friday on Evolve with Grace. Much love.